So just finally, some of those challenges around taking the social marketing approach. I think the first thing for us was the big challenge around the funders, because even though they gave the mandate and the funding to do a public education campaign, I don't think they quite knew what that was. And it wasn't until the team working in the Ministry of Social Development framed that up with the help of a social marketing company, with a marketing company, and with the help of research, that they really understood what this campaign was going to be about. But trying to sell prevention work and trying to sell social marketing work is really difficult, because it's so hard to get the data to show that you're making a difference. And immediately funders wanted to know, when are we going to save lives? When are we going to see the death rate coming down? And this social change work is long term. This is at least 50 years work, if not more. We've got the big vision about generations of change, and we know that we're not going to shift that straight away. So we had to be really clear about setting some intermediate outcomes for ourselves to show that we've made some change, some small steps towards that long-term change. But that's one of the really hardest things, is around helping people to see that we won't necessarily have the hard data to show that we've made a difference. We can show some small steps, but there's a lot of kind of trust and faith really that has to happen. And a lot of opportunities to find even the smallest amounts of evidence that will convince people that we're on the right journey. So I think that was one of the first things that made it really hard or difficult around adopting the social marketing approach, is staying true to that while also trying to please the funders and the leaders around the work, people who are supporting it at the political level. So what we know after these years of the campaign since 2007 is we can see some of changes through our stories and our feedback and anecdotal evidence from our partners. One bit of data we do have is around police reports, and we know during the time of the campaign, the reporting of domestic violence to police in New Zealand has doubled. So it's gone from around 50,000 to 100,000 calls for service to police every year. And when police are talking about that, some of it might be to do with changes in policing, but they're always saying that they think the campaign has increased understanding, increased awareness, encouraged people to ask for help early, and they're also noticing that many more different people are reporting violence, especially neighbours and grandparents who never used to do that before. So they are saying that people are coming to them a lot earlier too, and not waiting till it's a crisis. And that's the same thing we're hearing from women's refuges and stopping violence programs, that people are turning up earlier in terms of ages, younger people, but also earlier in terms of the first time that violence happens or that they're worried about abuse. People are coming to ask for help before it's got really bad or before it's been going for a long time. And we've had a significant increase in referrals to stopping violence programs, so self-referrals, that's people who are using violence turning up and asking for help at programs. So that data has been really hard to collect, because all of those agencies haven't got consistent data collection around the country. So we are relying a lot on anecdotal evidence there. And unfortunately, there's been changes to the way the police collect their data as well during the time of the campaign. So we can't even map the data from before and, from the beginning to now around family violence calls. We have, though, been conducting our own reach and retention research and our own kind of market research to see what we can find in terms of those small changes in attitudes and behaviours that relate to our objectives. So we did some tracking research or reach and retention research after each of the phases of the TV advertising, and we asked similar kinds of questions around awareness of the campaign, around changes in attitudes and behaviours, so that we could track any changes over time. But the last one we've been able to do is 2011, because since then we haven't been doing so much TV advertising, so it wouldn't have nearly the same kind of reach that we have. But I think the questions, while they're framed around the advertising, really reflect the campaign at large. So they reflect the community action work that's been happening in all the other communications that we've been doing across the country, as well as the work of our community partners. So it's not just about the TV advertising. So in 2011, we interviewed through phone surveys a representative sample of 900 people. And from that, we found that there were fewer people who were recalling the ads because this was the third phase. We weren't showing them quite so much. We had 74% recall of the advertising. That was down from the high of 95% in 2008, but it's still pretty good, we thought. 74% is still quite significant for a whole of community awareness around a social marketing campaign. So the first slide here shows you about the message recall, about what people can remember around the TV advertising. 95% of people who saw the advertising recall that the message was about "it's not okay," which is exactly what we want. They're getting the message. And 66% of people get that it's a call to action as well. They get that the campaign is around speaking out, taking a stand, offering help. So people are recognising those messages in ours. 30% of people said they knew someone in a family violence situation, and 35% of people said they knew someone, they knew of a family violence situation, whether it was not a known person. And that was up from 26% in 2008, and it was significantly higher for Māori and Pacific populations as well. So we can see from the next slide around the questions we asked to try and get at those changes in attitudes, to try and recognise what New Zealand attitudes were and whether they were shifting. So from this slide you can see 98% of people think family violence is a serious problem and we shouldn't ignore it. So that's just about all New Zealanders. 92% feel that change is possible, that it's possible to be violence-free. So that means a significant number of New Zealanders feel there is hope and that a better life is possible. 77% said the campaign had helped them understand how to help a victim or how to help someone who's experiencing violence. And there was a big shift in people who now said they believed they could influence someone else's behaviour who was being violent. So in 2008, 57% of people thought they could influence someone's behaviour. And in 2010, it was 81%. And in 2011, it was 82% of New Zealanders. So that's a significant number of people who feel they could help change someone's violent behaviour. The next slide shows about actions, changes in behaviours. So we didn't think we could ask about people who stopped being violent or that kind of significant change in behaviour, but we're asking about the small steps that we think are on the road to making changes around behaviour for people who are using violence, people who are experiencing violence, and for the helpers in the communities around them. So the kind of questions that we asked were around whether you'd talk to friends or family about family violence, whether you tried to stop some violence that you were worried about, whether you got information about family violence or parenting, whether you contacted a service, whether you went to a website to find out more information, whether you'd called a phone line, and also trying to get at that community action kind of thing, whether you'd participated in a community event or a community project that was around preventing family violence. And from this latest research, we found that 1 in 3 people across New Zealand were taking some kind of action, so one of those actions, and that's 31% in this research. That was up from 22% in 2008. So you can see from this slide those numbers broken down a bit. 19% said they'd talked to a family or a friend that they were worried about, and that was up from 14%, but significantly higher numbers for Māori that were around 30%, and for Pacific around 30% as well, and more females, younger females especially, are asking than men. 13% said they had taken some other action to try and stop violence, but again that was much higher for Māori and Pacific people. That was more around 23%. 14% of people had obtained information about family violence. 7% had contacted an organisation or talked to a community leader. 4% had visited a website. 4% had taken part in community activities, which was pretty good. We were really happy that we finally started asking that question and wish we had asked that earlier on too. And 11% said they had done at least one of these actions in the last 3 months, and it was the first time they had ever done something. So we were seeing the emerging helper or new action takers coming through in the research. So the next slide shows you the difference around taking action for people who knew about someone experiencing family violence. So the first one is about all the population. This slide here is when you, for anyone who knew someone experiencing violence or whether they knew of family violence in the area. And you can see the difference. Now we have 56% of people taking some kind of action. So for those who are aware, there's more of them doing something or taking some kind of action around family violence. And also the emerging helper that I talked about before. 4 out of 10 people who had taken some kind of action felt reluctant or didn't really want to, but did it anyway. And so we thought that was really important because we think that's showing increasing personal relevance and increasing propensity to act. So even people who don't feel comfortable or who have never done it before are taking some kind of action. So the next couple of slides show trying to get at prevention, trying to get at activities in the community that are around prevention. So we're asking about actions preemptively. Have you done anything to before violence has happened to help make a difference to stop violence happening at all? And we can see that 27% of people who answered that question said they had done something preemptively, and what they're talking about is having a conversation with their children, having a family meeting, talking about the kind of behaviours that are and aren't acceptable, talking about the fact that if anything happens to you, it's okay to come to speak to us, we'll help, or there'll be people in the community who can help. So we're trying to get there at the primary prevention part of the campaign to see if we can see whether we're actually getting people thinking about creating safe communities and creating safe families before violence has even happened. At the next slide, so those are those 2 slides. At the next slide, we're combining these 2 things together. We're combining the action takers, people who had done something, who knew to respond to family violence, and then also people who had done something preemptively. So putting those together, we've got the whole big group of people who have taken some kind of action, so people who have changed their behaviour. And here you can see that the numbers are significantly increased, especially high numbers for Māori men and women, Pacific men and women. 52% of people having taken some kind of action around family violence. So what I wanted to show you just at the end is some of our comments from our community partners and from people in the community who've engaged with the campaign, because I think that says everything about the impact and about the successes of the campaign. Just finally, I wanted to share with you a summary of what I think are the highlights of what we've learned from the campaign, and and then just an encouragement to get in touch. So I think some of the things that we've learned that's been really important for me personally, and what I think have made a difference with this campaign. The first thing is about that light and dark, and the really important idea about being clear about naming the problem, about what it is that we're trying to shift, but always bringing it into the positive, always showing that change is possible, keeping the inspiration, keeping the hope, keeping the non-judgmental, non-shaming and blaming approach. I think that's what's been different about this campaign compared to other things that New Zealand had been trying before and compared to other social marketing campaigns. So showing people that change is possible, that a better life is possible. And that showing is really important too. It's not about telling people what to do. It's about telling stories so that people can see that changes happen for other people, about gently moving people, about giving them the information so they can use it in their own way. And I think that kind of gentle and basic information has been really important. I think having champions, having local people who can drive the campaign, who can be the action takers and the leaders for this work has been really important for us to be able to provide that light touch support, to be able to nurture and encourage and resource them a little bit, but to be able to grow the movement of people across New Zealand who are taking action to prevent violence has been some of the most exciting stuff. So we feel like there's a whole team of people that we work with, a whole movement or workforce, however you want to put it, of people who are engaged in family violence prevention. And when we can get lots of people who do this because of their passion and not paid to do the jobs, that's when we think things will change. That's when we'll see the shifts in communities that we're starting to see in some communities already. So the idea of us kind of building capacity so that we could step away and that people would pick this up and run with this right across New Zealand, across different communities, that's been a vision of ours and something that I think has been really important to helping people realise what their role is and what space they could start to do stuff across New Zealand in their own community. I think that we've been made some good use of research and gone back to the evidence, being really clear about it, what it says, engaged with academics, got feedback from people in the sector, and really used that to observe where things are at, and not just done what other people have done or what seems to be the first common sense idea to do, but actually really looked at it a bit more deeply and from different perspectives. And maybe having some of the social marketing people involved has really helped with that as well. But having the new eyes, people from outside the sector, looking at the information that we used to deal with every day, has been really useful, because in terms of framing it up for new audiences, in terms of working out what's most important in the messages and getting rid of jargon, getting rid of all the jargon so that people in communities can engage with that, understand it, but not necessarily be baffled by by the messages and the information that we need to give them. So that's keeping the audience focused, which I think is, some of the strongest stuff that we can do with our projects, is helping people be really intentional about their audience and the right messages, and encouraging that local ownership, local leadership, making it what you want, and just not having an ownership over the branding or the messages, just letting people do what they wanted to make it right for them, to make it relevant in their own communities. I think that's been some of the brilliance about it. So we have had the brand and the look and the colours that we've used, but we've just let people use those messages as they fit their community, combine them with other campaigns, develop their own messages, reference ours, use our website and other things however they wanted to, so that they can make something truly that's owned and led by their own community. And I think that's been the brilliance of having the national supportive environment and messages with locally led, locally relevant campaigns. So anyway, lots of that information is on our website, on our Facebook page, in our research. I encourage you to go and have a look at all of that, please, if you want to, and give us your feedback. Let us know what you think, share your research, share your ideas, let us know if you're doing similar projects so we can talk together. It would be fantastic to have a bit more of an international conversation about this. We talk about changing the world. We have the big vision around violence-free families, violence-free communities. We know this is about significant social transformation. We're doing the small steps towards it in a small country, in some small communities, and so we'd love to be part of a much bigger conversation. So thank you very much.